Commander Jake Morrison stood at the bridge window of the UES Liberty, watching the massive alien space station grow larger as they approached. The station was unlike anything humans had ever built. It looked like a giant metal flower with dozens of arms stretching out in all directions. Lights blinked along its surface like stars, and ships from different worlds moved around it like busy insects. Jake had been in space for 15 years, but this was different. This was first contact with an entire galactic community. His hands felt sweaty inside his gloves as he thought about what this meant for humanity. "Commander, we're getting another transmission from the station," said Lieutenant Amy Price from the communications desk. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the excitement underneath. "Put it through," Jake replied. A strange voice filled the bridge. It spoke English, but the words sounded odd, like someone learning the language from a book. "Human Vessel Liberty, you are cleared for Docking Bay 7. Welcome to Council Station Harmony." Jake nodded to his pilot. "Take us in, Danny." Captain Danny Ross, the best pilot Jake had ever worked with, guided the Liberty toward the docking bay. Through the window, Jake could see other ships. Some looked like metal fish, others like floating crystals, and one looked like it was made of flowing water. In the passenger section of the ship, Ambassador Lisa Kane was checking her notes for the 100th time. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but Jake knew she was tougher than she looked. The president had chosen her personally for this mission. "Are you ready for this, Lisa?" asked Dr. Peter Walsh, the team's language expert. He was a tall man with messy brown hair who always seemed excited about everything. Lisa smiled, but Jake could see she was nervous too. "As ready as anyone can be for meeting aliens, I suppose." Colonel Ben Hayes sat quietly in the corner watching everything. He was there as military advisor, but Jake hoped they wouldn't need his expertise. Ben was good at his job, but his job was war. The Liberty shook gently as it connected to the docking bay. Jake felt his heart beating faster. This was it. Humans were about to meet the galactic community. The airlock hissed open, and Jake stepped through first, followed by the diplomatic team. The air smelled strange, like metal and flowers mixed together. The corridor they entered was huge, with a ceiling so high Jake couldn't see the top in the dim light. Waiting for them were 3 aliens. Jake tried not to stare, but it was hard. The first alien was tall and thin with blue skin and 4 arms. It wore something that looked like a fancy robe. The second looked like a person-shaped crystal that glowed softly from inside. The third was the strangest of all. It seemed to be made of gas or smoke, constantly shifting and moving but somehow keeping a human-like shape. The blue alien stepped forward and made a gesture that might have been a bow. "Welcome, humans from the world you call Earth. I am Secretary Vexhai of the Altarian Confederacy. We are honored to meet you." Lisa stepped forward and bowed back. "Thank you, Secretary Vexhai. I am Ambassador Lisa Kane, representing the people of Earth. We are grateful for your welcome." The crystal alien spoke next, its voice sounding like music. "I am Counselor Shen of the Vorthan Assembly. Your arrival brings great curiosity to our community." The gas alien's voice was like wind through leaves. "And I am Elder Thos of the Zephyrian Hegemony. We have much to learn from each other, as so." They walked through the station. Jake was amazed by what he saw. The corridors were filled with aliens of all shapes and sizes. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, others floated, and some moved in ways Jake couldn't understand. But they all seemed to get along peacefully. "How long has the council existed?" Lisa asked as they walked. "More than 2,000 of your years," Vexhai replied. 17 species work together for peace and progress. Soon it may be 18. They entered a large room with a curved ceiling covered in stars. It looked like being inside a planet-sized dome. In the center was a circular table with chairs of different sizes and shapes. This was clearly where important decisions were made. "Please sit," said Elder Thos. "We must complete the registration process for your world to join our community." Lisa sat in a chair that had been specially made for humans. The aliens had clearly done their research. Jake and the others stood behind her. Vexhai pulled out what looked like a glowing tablet. We need basic information about your world, population, technology level, and your planet's official designation in the star charts. Our population is about 8 billion, Lisa began. Our technology level? Well, we've just achieved faster than light travel, and our planet is officially designated as Sol 3, the third planet orbiting the star we call the Sun. The three aliens looked at each other. Jake noticed something change in their expressions, but he couldn't tell what it meant. Sol 3, repeated Elder Thos slowly. The coordinates you provided, may I check these against our historical records? Of course, Lisa said. Is there a problem? Probably not, Thos replied, but his gas-like form was moving more quickly. No, it is just standard procedure. Some star systems appear in our old records. I will return shortly. As Elder Thos left the room, Jake felt a strange chill. The way the alien had said historical records didn't sound routine at all. It sounded worried. Vexhai tried to continue the conversation, asking about human culture and government, but Jake could tell the alien was distracted. Even the crystal being Counselor Shen seemed dimmer than before. Is everything all right? Dr. Walsh asked. Elder Thos seemed concerned about something. The Elder is very thorough, Vexhai said quickly. He likes to check everything twice. Please tell us more about your art and music. But Jake wasn't listening to the small talk anymore. Something was wrong. He could feel it in the way the aliens kept glancing at the door where Elder Thos had gone. Whatever the Elder was looking up in those historical records, it wasn't good news. Lisa continued answering questions about human civilization, but Jake noticed she was getting the same feeling he was. Colonel Hayes had moved closer to the door, his hand resting casually near his sidearm. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, Elder Thos returned. His gaseous form was moving in quick, nervous patterns, and when he spoke, his voice was different. Ambassador Kane, he said slowly, we need to discuss your planet's history. The room fell silent. Jake felt his heart sink. Whatever Elder Thos had found, it was going to change everything. 3 days passed before Elder Thos returned to the meeting room. Jake had spent those days exploring the station with Dr. Walsh, trying to learn more about the different alien species. But everywhere they went, Jake noticed aliens whispering and pointing at them. Something had changed since their arrival. When Elder Thos finally appeared, Jake almost didn't recognize him. The Elder's gaseous form, which had been a pleasant light blue before, was now pale and gray. His movements were quick and jerky, like someone who was very afraid. Ambassador Lisa Kane was already waiting at the council table with Colonel Hayes and Dr. Susan Carter, Earth's expert on ancient history. Lisa had called Dr. Carter from the FIR ship when it became clear they might need her knowledge. Elder Thos, Lisa said as the alien approached. We've been waiting. What did you find in your records? Thos didn't sit down. Instead, he floated near the wall as if he wanted to keep his distance from the humans. Ambassador Kane, what I found, it changes everything. Secretary Vexhai and Counselor Shen entered the room. Jake noticed that Vexhai's blue skin had lost its bright color and the crystal alien was barely glowing at all. Please, Lisa said, trying to keep her voice calm. Just tell us what's wrong. Elder Thos began to speak, his voice shaking like wind through broken glass. Your planet, Sol 3, appears in our oldest records that go back 15,000 years, long before any of our current species could travel between the stars. Dr. Carter leaned forward. 15,000 years? That's impossible. Human civilization is only about 10,000 years old. That's what we thought too, Thos replied. But the coordinates match perfectly. Your planet is listed in the Forbidden Archives under a different name. Jake felt cold suddenly. What name? Hadron Prime, Thos whispered. The homeworld of the Hadron Collective. The name meant nothing to Jake, but he saw Dr. Carter's face go white. Colonel Hayes stepped closer to the group. I've never heard of any Hadron Collective, Lisa said. There must be some mistake. Counselor Shen's crystal form flickered. When the alien spoke, its musical voice was full of fear. There is no mistake. The Hadron Collective was the most feared warrior race in galactic history. Warriors? Colonel? Hayes asked, suddenly interested. Elder Thas's gaseous form swirled faster. They were not just warriors, Colonel. They were something far worse. The records describe them as the only species that actually enjoyed war. They didn't fight for territory or resources. They fought because they were good at it. Dr. Walsh, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. But we're not warriors. Humans want peace. The physical descriptions in the records match you exactly, HFY said, his forearms trembling. 2 arms, 2 legs, hair on your heads the same height and build. Even the way you stand and move is identical to what the ancient files describe. Jake looked around at his fellow humans. They were just ordinary people. Lisa was a diplomat who had spent her life trying to prevent wars. Dr. Walsh studied languages because he loved learning about other cultures. Even Colonel Hayes, who was military, had joined the space program to explore, not to fight. How can you be sure these Hadron people were the same species as us? Dr. Carter asked. Maybe they just looked similar. Elder Thas floated to a wall, panel, and pressed something. A holographic image appeared in the center of the room. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The image showed a group of soldiers in ancient-looking armor, but their faces were completely human. They could have been Jake's neighbors back on Earth. This image is over 12,000 years old, Thas said. It shows Hadron warriors during the Void War. The Void War? Lisa asked. Counselor Shen answered, its crystal form pulsing with remembered fear. The greatest threat our galaxy has ever known. Creatures from another dimension invaded our space, consuming entire star systems. They couldn't be reasoned with or stopped by conventional weapons. What happened to them? Colonel Hayes asked. The Hadron Collective destroyed them, HFY said quietly. They were the only species capable of fighting the void touched and winning. But the way they fought... Elder Thas finished the sentence. They didn't just defeat the enemy. They seemed to enjoy the challenge. The more dangerous the opponent, the more excited they became. They turned warfare into an art form. Jake felt sick. Are you saying humans are descendants of these warrior people? The evidence suggests it, Thas replied. But that's not the worst part. Lisa's voice was barely a whisper. What's the worst part? The Hadron Collective didn't disappear. Naturally, HFY explained. They were exiled from the galaxy. The other species were so afraid of what they might do next that they worked together to force them out. Dr. Carter stood up suddenly. Wait a minute. If they were exiled, how did humans end up on Earth? Earth is inside this galaxy. The 3 aliens exchanged looks. Elder Thas spoke first. We don't know. The exile was supposed to send them beyond the galactic rim, to empty space where they could never return. But somehow, they found their way back. Colonel Hayes stepped forward. What exactly did these Hadron do that was so terrible? If they saved the galaxy from invasion, why were they punished? Counselor Shen's light dimmed even more. Because they were too good at war. The records show that after defeating the void touched, they began looking for new challenges. They would help smaller species fight their enemies, but they always demanded the right to study their opponent's tactics. They were learning, HFY added. Every battle made them smarter, faster, more dangerous. The records say they possessed something called adaptive warfare syndrome. Dr. Walsh looked confused. What does that mean? It means they instinctively learned from every fight, Elder Thas explained. They never made the same mistake twice. Worse, they seemed to enjoy fighting enemies who could challenge them. The harder the opponent, the happier they became. Jake thought about human military history. Humans had always been good at adapting their tactics, learning from defeats, and finding new ways to win. Was that what the aliens were talking about? Lisa was thinking the same thing. Even if humans are related to these Hadron people, that was 15,000 years ago. People change. Species evolve. Do they? Elder Thas asked. The way your Colonel Hayes moves, the way he watches for threats, the way all of you automatically spread out when entering a new room. These are the same behavioral patterns described in the Hadron files. Jake realized with shock that the Elder was right. Without thinking about it, the humans had positioned themselves in the room so they could see all the exits and watch each other's backs. It was something Jake's military training had taught him, but maybe it was something deeper. "We need proof," Dr. Carter said firmly. "You can't judge an entire species based on old records and behavioral similarities." Counselor Shen pulsed brighter. "There is a way to be certain. The ancient files contain genetic samples from Hadron warriors. If humans truly are their descendants, your DNA will carry specific markers." Lisa looked around at her team. Jake could see the fear in her eyes, but also determination. "What kind of test?" "A simple blood sample," Vexhai said. "The analysis will take only a few hours." Colonel Hayes rolled up his sleeve. "Let's get this over with." One by one, each human gave a blood sample. As they waited for the results, Jake noticed more changes around the station. Alien ships that had been docked for routine maintenance were suddenly leaving. Others were moving to positions farther from the human vessel. "They're scared of us," Dr. Walsh said quietly. "Can you blame them?" Dr. Carter replied. "If the records are true, our ancestors were the most dangerous species this galaxy has ever known." Jake stared out the window at the stars. Somewhere out, there was Earth, the planet humans called home. But was it really home? Or was it just where their warrior ancestors had been hiding for 15,000 years? In a few hours, they would have their answer. Jake wasn't sure he wanted to know the truth. The waiting was the worst part. Jake paced around the guest quarters that had been assigned to the human delegation, checking the time every few minutes. The genetic test results were supposed to be ready in 3 hours. That was 4 hours ago. Dr. Susan Carter sat at a desk reading through historical files that the council had given them access to. Her face grew more worried with each page she turned. "Jake, you need to see this." Jake walked over and looked at the screen. It showed an image of ancient warriors in battle. The tactics they used looked familiar, too familiar. These look like modern human military formations. "That's not the scary part," Dr. Carter said. "Look at this battle report." Jake read the text on the screen. It described how Hadron warriors had defeated an enemy force 3 times their size by using what the report called adaptive flanking maneuvers and psychological warfare techniques. The description sounded exactly like tactics Jake had learned in military school. "Maybe it's just coincidence," Jake said, but he didn't believe it himself. Dr. Peter Walsh entered the room, looking pale. "I just talked to some of the station's language experts. They showed me samples of ancient Hadron communication records." "And?" Dr. Carter asked. "The sentence structure, the way they organized their thoughts, even some of their expressions. It's all similar to human languages. Not identical, but like it came from the same root." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "How is that possible?" Before anyone could answer, Ambassador Lisa Kane came through the door. Behind her walked Colonel Ben Hayes, and Jake could tell from their expressions that something bad had happened. "What is it?" Jake asked. Lisa sat down heavily in a chair. "I just came from a meeting with Secretary Vexhai. The genetic test results are ready, but before they announce them, he wanted to warn me about something." "Warn you about what?" Colonel Hayes answered. "About what happens if the results are positive. If humans really are descended from the Hadron Collective, the Council has protocols for dealing with us." Dr. Walsh looked confused. "What kind of protocols?" Lisa's voice was quiet. "The kind that involve weapons pointed at our ship." Jake moved to the window and looked out. What he saw made his blood run cold. The alien ships that had moved away from the station over the past few days were now arranged in a clear pattern. Around the human vessel, it was a battle formation. "They're surrounding us," Jake said. "Counselor Zeth Mara from the Aquatic Dominion demanded the genetic verification," Colonel Hayes explained. "She said that if we're really Hadron descendants, we're a threat to galactic peace just by existing." Dr. Carter looked up from her reading. According to these files, the last time anyone saw the Hadron Collective was during something called the Great Exile. The Council species worked together to force them out of the galaxy. What did they do that was so terrible? Dr. Walsh asked. Doctor? Carter read from the screen. It says here that after the Void War ended, the Hadron Collective began what they called improvement campaigns. They would find species that were having conflicts and offer to help them fight their enemies. That sounds helpful, Jake said. It was at first, but the Hadron weren't interested in ending the conflicts. They wanted to study them. They would help one side win, then study how the losers fought. Then they would find the losing side's relatives or allies and help them fight the winners. Lisa looked horrified. They were keeping wars going on purpose? Worse than that. They were making them bigger and more complex. The records say they turned simple border disputes into galaxy-wide conflicts, just so they could study different types of warfare. Colonel Hayes was reading over Dr. Carter's shoulder. It says here that they called it tactical evolution through applied conflict scenarios. Jake felt sick. They were using entire species as test subjects for their war games. Dr. Walsh sat down hard. And we might be their descendants. A soft chime sounded from the room's communication system. Elder Thos's voice came through, sounding even more worried than before. Ambassador Kane, please report to the council chamber. The genetic analysis is complete. Lisa stood up, smoothing down her diplomatic uniform. Well, I guess it's time to find out the truth. As they walked through the station corridors toward the council chamber, Jake noticed that the halls were much emptier than before. The few aliens they did see moved quickly away from the human group, some even ducking into side passages to avoid them. Word has spread, Colonel Hayes observed quietly. When they reached the council chamber, Jake saw that it was packed with aliens. Representatives from all 17 council species were there, plus many others Jake didn't recognize. The mood in the room was tense and fearful. Elder Thos stood at the center of the room holding a glowing data pad. His gaseous form was moving in quick, nervous patterns. Next to him stood Counselor Zethmara, a blue-scaled alien with large black eyes who Jake assumed was from the Aquatic Dominion. Ambassador Kane, Elder Thos began. The genetic analysis has been completed under strict council supervision. The results have been verified by 3 independent laboratories. Lisa stepped forward. We're ready to hear the results. Zethmara spoke in a voice like rushing water. The human DNA samples contain 17 specific genetic markers that are identical to preserved samples from Hadron Collective warriors. Jake felt the room get colder. Elder Thos continued. The genetic similarity is 97.3%. By galactic law, any species showing more than 90% similarity to a previously cataloged species is considered to be the same species. What does that mean exactly? Lisa asked, though Jake could tell she already knew. Counselor Shen, the crystal alien, flickered as it spoke. It means that humans are not a new species seeking membership in the council. You are the return of the Hadron Collective. The room erupted in nervous chatter. Jake could hear aliens speaking in dozens of different languages, but the tone was the same in all of them. Fear. Secretary Vexhai raised all 4 of his arms for silence. The question now is what to do about this discovery. The answer is obvious, Zethmara said firmly. The exile order is still in effect. The Hadron Collective was banished from this galaxy for crimes against galactic peace. That order must be enforced. Dr. Walsh stepped forward. But we're not the same people who committed those crimes. That was 15,000 years ago. Another, alien Jake didn't recognize, spoke up. Genetic memory suggests otherwise. The behavioral patterns we've observed in your species match historical records exactly. Colonel Hayes looked around the room. What behavioral patterns? Elder Thos answered. The way you automatically assess tactical situations, the way you position yourselves for optimal defensive coverage, the way you analyze every conversation for strategic advantage. These are all documented Hadron traits. Jake realized with a shock that the aliens were right. Even now, he was automatically cataloging the positions of every alien in the room, noting which ones might be threats and planning escape routes. Colonel Hayes was doing the same thing. So was Dr. Carter. Even your scientist shows the pattern, Zethamara pointed out, looking at Dr. Carter. She didn't just read our historical files for information. She was analyzing them for tactical intelligence, studying our past conflicts to understand our weaknesses. Dr. Carter's face went red. She had been doing exactly that, though she hadn't realized it at the time. Lisa tried to maintain diplomatic calm. Even if we are genetically related to the Hadron Collective, we are not them. Humanity has chosen a path of peace and exploration, not conquest. Have you? Asked a new voice. Captain Roy Griffin of the escort vessel UES Defender entered the chamber. Jake was surprised to see him. Ship captains usually stayed with their vessels during diplomatic meetings. Captain Griffin, Lisa said, "Why are you here?" Roy's face was grim. "Because I've been monitoring alien military communications and I think you need to know what they're saying about us." Zethamara hissed. "You were spying on our communications?" "Just like your people have been spying on ours," Roy replied calmly. "And just like a Hadron descendant would do?" The room fell silent. Jake realized that Captain Griffin had just proven the aliens' point. Humans did think tactically, even when they were trying to be peaceful. Elder Thas's voice was sad when he spoke. "You see? Even now, when you're trying to convince us you're different, you demonstrate the same strategic thinking that made the Hadron Collective so dangerous." Lisa looked around the room at the fearful faces of dozens of alien species. "What do you want us to do?" Counselor Zethamara answered. "The same thing we did 15,000 years ago. Leave this galaxy and never return." The council chamber felt like a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. Jake watched as the alien representatives split into 3 clear groups. The largest group, led by Counselor Zethamara, wanted humanity completely removed from the galaxy. A smaller group argued for keeping humans locked in their home system. The smallest group, mostly younger species, suggested giving humans a chance to prove they had changed. Ambassador Lisa Kane stood in the center of the room, surrounded by dozens of hostile alien faces. Jake could see the strain on her as she tried to find words that might save humanity's future. "Honored council members," Lisa began, "I understand your concerns about humanity's genetic heritage, but you're judging us for crimes we didn't commit, committed by people who lived 15,000 years ago." Elder Thas's gaseous form swirled nervously. "Ambassador Kane, may I show you something that might change your perspective?" A holographic display activated in the center of the room. Jake watched as images from the ancient Hadron archives began playing. The first showed what looked like a peaceful negotiation between the Hadron and another species. But as the video continued, Jake saw the negotiation turn into something else. "This is from the Kelthera System War," Elder Thas explained. "The Hadron Collective was invited to mediate a mining dispute between 2 species. Watch what happens." In the hologram, Jake saw Hadron diplomats, humans in ancient clothing, meeting with representatives of 2 different alien races. At first, everything seemed normal. The Hadron listened to both sides and suggested compromises. But then the video jumped forward in time. 3 months later, Elder Thas continued, the simple mining dispute had become a full-scale war involving 12 different species across 4 star systems. The hologram showed massive space battles, burning planets, and millions of refugees fleeing their homes. In the middle of it all, Jake could see Hadron warriors fighting alongside different groups, constantly switching sides. They weren't trying to end the conflict, Dr. Susan Carter said, understanding dawning in her voice. They were studying it. Exactly, Counselor Zethamara said. Every time one side gained an advantage, the Hadron would help the losing side with new tactics or weapons. They kept the war balanced so it would continue as long as possible. Colonel Ben Hayes stepped closer to the display. What did they gain from this? A new alien spoke up, one Jake hadn't seen before. It looked like a giant insect with multiple eyes. I am hive mind Kextra of the collective swarm. My people were one of the species involved in that war. The Hadron studied our hive tactics, then used that knowledge to defeat the Void Touched. So they were learning, Dr. Peter Walsh said. But they used that knowledge to save the galaxy. Yes, Kekstra replied, but they didn't stop there. After the Void War ended, they began creating conflicts just to study them. They would find peaceful species and introduce them to aggressive neighbors, then watch what happened. Jake felt sick as he watched more holographic records. The Hadron Collective had systematically turned the galaxy into their personal laboratory for studying warfare. Peaceful species became warriors. Small conflicts became galactic wars. All so the Hadron could learn new ways to fight. The worst part, Elder Thoth said sadly, was that they seemed to enjoy it. The more challenging the opponent, the happier they became. They treated war like other species treated art or music. Lisa's voice was barely a whisper. And you think humans will do the same thing? Counselor Shen's crystal form flickered as it spoke. Look at your own history, Ambassador. Your species has been at war almost continuously for thousands of years. Even now, when you're exploring space, your ships carry weapons. Captain Roy Griffin spoke from the back of the room. We carry weapons for defense. That's what the Hadron said too, Seth Mara replied. But defense became offense very quickly. Jake found himself thinking about human military history. Every major advance in human technology had been used for warfare sooner or later. Airplanes became fighters and bombers. Nuclear power became nuclear weapons. Even space technology started, with military rockets. Dr. Carter was reading from a datapad. According to these records, the Hadron had something called adaptive warfare syndrome. It meant they instinctively learned from every conflict and became more dangerous each time. Do humans show the same trait? Colonel Hayes asked. Elder Thoth looked directly at him. Colonel, in the 3 days you've been on this station, you've already figured out the defensive weaknesses of our security systems, identified which species would be most vulnerable in combat, and developed at least 4 different plans for taking control of the station if necessary. Hayes went pale. How do you know that? Because we've been watching you. All of you. Every human on this station has been unconsciously analyzing everything around them for tactical advantage. You can't help it. It's in your genes. Jake realized the alien was right. Without thinking about it, he had been doing exactly what Elder Thoth described. He knew which corridors provided the best cover, which aliens would be most dangerous in a fight, and how to disable the station's main power systems. He had told himself it was just military training, but maybe it was something deeper. Lisa tried, one more time. Even if we have these instincts, we can control them. Humanity wants peace. Does it? Asked a new voice. The speaker was an alien Jake didn't recognize, tall and thin with silver skin. I am Scholar Veldon of the Archive Keepers. We have studied your species' transmissions for the past 3 months. A new holographic display appeared, showing images from Earth. Jake saw news broadcasts about wars, movies about battles, video games where players fought each other. Even Earth sports involved some form of conflict or competition. Your entertainment focuses on conflict, Scholar Veldon continued. Your stories celebrate warriors and conquerors. Your children play games that simulate warfare. This is exactly what the Hadron archives describe. Dr. Walsh tried to defend humanity. Those are just games and stories. They don't mean we want real war, don't they? Scholar Veldon asked. According to your own transmissions, Earth currently has over 40 active military conflicts. For a species that wants peace, you certainly engage in a lot of warfare. The evidence was overwhelming. Jake could see it in the faces of his fellow humans. They were all beginning to understand that maybe the aliens were right to be afraid. Counselor Seth Mara spoke again. The Council has debated for days about what to do with your species. We have reached a decision. Lisa straightened her shoulders. What is your decision? You have one choice, Seth Mara announced. Submit willingly to exile from this galaxy, and we will provide you with the coordinates to reach empty space beyond the rim. Refuse, and we will enforce the ancient exile order by military action. The room fell silent. Jake looked around at the alien faces surrounding them. These weren't evil beings trying to destroy humanity out of hatred. They were terrified creatures who had learned from history what the Hadron Collective was capable of. Colonel Hayes stepped forward. "How long do we have to decide?" "You have until tomorrow," Elder Thoth said. "If you choose exile, you may take your technology and whatever supplies you need. If you refuse..." The Elder didn't need to finish the sentence. Jake had seen the weapons, platforms surrounding their ship. Humanity's first contact with the galactic community was about to become humanity's last contact. Lisa looked at each of her team members. Jake could see the weight of the entire human species on her shoulders. Whatever she decided would determine the fate of 8 billion people. "We need time to discuss this among ourselves," Lisa said finally. "Of course," Zeth Mara replied. "But remember, Ambassador, this is not a negotiation. This is an ultimatum. Choose exile, or we will choose it for you." As they walked back to their quarters, Jake couldn't help but notice how the aliens moved away from them in the corridors. Fear was thick in the air. These species had lived in peace for thousands of years, and now they were being reminded of the galaxy's most violent era. Back in their quarters, the human delegation sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Dr. Carter spoke. "What if they're right about us?" Jake didn't have an answer. None of them did. Tomorrow, humanity would have to choose between exile and extinction, and Jake was beginning to wonder if there was really any difference between the two. The human delegation spent the night in heated discussion. Jake sat by the window, watching alien ships move into position around the station. By dawn, there were over 50 warships forming a sphere around the human vessel. The message was clear. Humanity would leave peacefully or they wouldn't leave at all. Ambassador Lisa Kane had barely slept. She sat at the table, reading through diplomatic protocols and trying to find some way to change the Council's mind. But every argument she thought of seemed to prove the aliens' point about human tactical thinking. "We could ask for asylum with one of the younger species," Dr. Peter Walsh suggested. Some of them seemed sympathetic. Colonel Ben Hayes shook his head. "They're too afraid. Even if they wanted to help, they wouldn't go against the entire council." Dr. Susan Carter looked up from her reading. "I found something interesting in the historical records. The Hadron weren't always warriors. The earliest records show them as explorers and scientists, much like humans today." "What changed them?" Jake asked. "The Void War. Fighting those interdimensional creatures required them to become something they weren't naturally. The problem was, they couldn't change back afterward." Jake thought about that. Maybe humanity was at the same crossroads the ancient Hadron had faced. They could choose to become the warriors the galaxy feared, or find another path. A soft chime indicated someone was at their door. Jake opened it to find Elder Thoth waiting outside, his gaseous form more settled than it had been in days. "Elder Thoth," Lisa said, standing up. "Have you come for our decision?" "No, Ambassador, I have come to offer you something else. A third option that wasn't discussed in the council chamber." The humans looked at each other with surprise. "What kind of option?" Colonel Hayes asked. Thoth entered the room and seemed to study each of them carefully. "Before I speak, I need to know something. Commander Morrison, what did you think when you saw our weapons platforms surrounding your ship?" Jake was surprised by the question. "I thought about how to disable them if necessary." "And you, Dr. Carter? When you read our historical files, what was your first instinct?" Dr. Carter looked embarrassed. "I found myself analyzing the tactical information, looking for patterns in how different species fought." Thoth turned to Dr. Walsh. "And you, linguist, when you studied our communication methods, what did you discover?" "I noticed that each species has weaknesses in their communication patterns that could be exploited if necessary," Dr. Walsh admitted quietly. Elder Thoth was quiet for a moment. "You see? Even when trying to be peaceful, you think like warriors. It's not evil. It's simply who you are." Lisa looked frustrated. "So you're saying we can't change?" "No," Thoth replied. "I'm saying maybe you don't need to. The council is making a decision based on fear, but they've forgotten something important." "What's that?" Jake asked. "The void touched weren't destroyed. They were only pushed back beyond the galactic rim, and according to our deepest archives, they've been growing stronger in the darkness between galaxies. The room fell silent. Doctor, Carter was the first to speak. Are you saying they might return? Our long-range sensors have detected strange energy signatures at the galaxy's edge. Signatures that match historical records of void-touch technology. If they do return, we'll need the same kind of adaptive warfare that defeated them before. Colonel Hayes leaned forward. You want us to be your weapons? No, Thos said firmly. I want you to be our guardians. There's a difference. Lisa studied the Elder's gaseous form. What are you proposing? A treaty. Humanity accepts permanent monitoring and agrees to intervene only when the galaxy faces existential threats. In exchange, you're allowed to remain and develop in peace. Jake could see the appeal of the idea, but also the problems. The Council will never agree to that. They're too afraid of us. Some will, Thos said. The younger species remember the stories of the Void War. They know that sometimes peace requires the threat of violence to protect it. Dr. Walsh looked confused. But won't we eventually become like our ancestors? Won't the warrior instincts take over? Perhaps, but that's a risk the galaxy might have to take. Better to have controlled warriors who fight only when necessary than to be defenseless when the real monsters return. Before anyone could respond, Captain Roy Griffin's voice came over the communication system. Commander Morrison, please report. To the bridge immediately. We have a situation. Jake looked at the others. I'll be right back. When Jake reached the Liberty's bridge, he found Captain Griffin staring at the tactical display. The alien warships that had been surrounding them were moving into new formations. What's happening, Roy? Jake asked. 3 of the alien ships just broke formation and moved to defensive positions around our vessel. The other ships are still pointing weapons at us, but now they're also pointing weapons at each other. Jake looked at the display. The situation was exactly what Elder Thos had been talking about. The Council was split, and that division was creating the kind of conflict that might escalate quickly. Captain Morrison, came a voice over the radio. It was speaking heavily accented English. This is Battle Leader Kix of the Prism Collective. My ships stand with humanity. Another voice followed. Commander Morrison, this is Hive Mind Kextra. The collective swarm also offers protection to your vessel. Jake felt a chill as he realized what was happening. Just by being here, humanity was causing exactly the kind of division and conflict that the ancient Hadron had created. Even trying to be peaceful, they were making the situation worse. He rushed back to the guest quarters where the human delegation was still meeting with Elder Thos. Elder, Jake said as he entered, we have a bigger problem. Some of the alien ships are taking sides. This whole situation is about to turn into exactly the kind of conflict you're afraid will create. Thos's form swirled with agitation. The young species are acting on emotion rather than wisdom. This is dangerous. Lisa stood up. Then we need to end this before it gets worse. How? Colonel Hayes asked. Jake found himself thinking tactically again, but this time with a different goal. We do something the ancient Hadron never did. We make a choice that proves we're different. What choice? Dr. Carter asked. We go to the council chamber and surrender ourselves completely. No conditions, no negotiations. We tell them that if our presence is causing division and conflict, then we'll leave willingly to preserve galactic peace. Dr. Walsh looked shocked. That's giving up everything. No, Lisa said slowly, understanding what Jake meant. That's proving we're not like our ancestors. The Hadron would never have sacrificed their own interest for the greater good. Elder Thos's gaseous form stopped moving. You would do that? Accept exile to prevent civil conflict? If that's what it takes, Jake replied. But we want something in return. What? Thos asked. Lisa answered. If the galaxy ever faces the kind of threat that requires our skills, call us. We'll come back, fight your battles, and then leave again. No conquest, no permanent presence. Just protection when you need it most. Thos was quiet for a long moment. That is not what the Hadron would have offered. Colonel Hayes smiled grimly. That's the point. An hour later, the human delegation stood once again in the council chamber. But this time, Jake noticed, the room was different. The alien species were clearly divided into factions, with tension crackling in the air. Commander Jake Morrison stepped forward before Ambassador Kane could speak. This wasn't a diplomatic moment anymore, it was a military one, and it needed a soldier's directness. Honored Council, Jake began. We've come to a decision, but first I want you to look around this chamber. The aliens looked confused, but they followed Jake's gaze around the room. 3 days ago, this was a unified council representing 17 species in peaceful cooperation. Today, you're split into armed factions because of our presence. We're causing exactly the kind of division and conflict that you fear, Counselor Zethmara hissed. You see? They admit they bring chaos. Yes, Jake said simply. We do. Not because we want to, but because it's apparently in our nature. So we're going to remove that problem. He looked directly at Elder Thos. Humanity accepts exile from this galaxy. We'll return to Earth, gather our people, and leave for empty space beyond the galactic rim. The room erupted in surprised voices. Even the factions that had been supporting humanity looked shocked. Lisa stepped forward. But we want you to remember something. 15,000 years ago, our ancestors saved this galaxy from the void touched. If something like that ever threatens you again, send a message to the dark between galaxies. If humanity still exists, and if you truly need us, we'll return. Jake continued. We'll fight your wars, face your monsters, and be the warriors you're afraid we are. Then we'll leave again back to the darkness where we can't threaten your peace. Colonel Hayes added the final piece. We're not asking for trust or friendship. We're offering you a weapon you can lock away until you desperately need it. Use us when you must, then send us away when the danger is over. The chamber was completely silent. Jake could see aliens looking at each other with confusion and surprise. Finally, Elder Thos spoke. This is, unexpected. You would sacrifice your place in the galactic community to preserve our unity? Yes, Lisa said simply.